wanna do you want to do
Sure. This is Cliff Horton, HORN, Wildlife Service, Division of Management Authority.
Great, thanks everyone. The other thing I will note before that I forgot to say is that I am recording the webinar, and we'll talk at the end to make sure everyone's comfortable to share that recording. We can always just share it within this group if that's what folks are most comfortable with, depending on what types of information you talk about in law enforcement or regulatory issues. So we'll circle back to that at the end, but I did want folks to know that we are recording this in case others who couldn't join would like to see it. So next on my participant list here, I have Robin Black. If you wouldn't mind introducing yourself.
I'm Robin Black with the West Virginia Division of Forestry. I've been doing the ginseng program for West Virginia for over 25 years.
Great, welcome Robin. Eric Grudzinski.
Hi, I'm Eric Rudzinski, Wisconsin DNR. I'm an investigative warden. Worked for Wisconsin DNR for the past 20 years.
Great, welcome Eric. Carolyn Caldwell.
Hi everybody, I'm Carolyn Caldwell. I'm the Midwest Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies CITES representative, and I participated with you all in July 2017 when we started this process.
Great, welcome Carolyn. Laura Mins? Is that how you say it?
That's correct.
Great.
That's correct. I'm Laura Mins. I'm with the Indiana Division of Nature Preserves, and I just started my position July 1st. So I'm dove in with both feet and ready to go.
Excellent. Welcome. I see someone listed as Lisa. Doesn't have a last name.
Yes, hi, this is Lisa Cruz. I'm presuming I'm the Lisa there on the list. I'm from Georgia Department of Natural Resources. I'm a botanist with the Wildlife Conservation Section. And together with my colleague Trina Morris, we collaborate on management of the Georgia Ginseng Program among a lot of other duties for our conservation program. And we've been working on it since 2005.
Excellent, welcome. Another single name, Ollis?
Yeah, Ron Ollis from Ohio. I'm a law enforcement program administrator, which would be a captain for those who follow rank, and been doing this ginseng game for about 15 years.
Great, welcome Ron. David Lincecum, is that how you say your last name?
David Lincecum.
Lincecum?
Lincecum, correct. I'm with the Tennessee Division of Natural Areas. Been involved with ginseng on and off since 1998. Some of you may recognize the name Andrea Bishop. She retired from our division last year. She had been our ginseng coordinator for a number of years, and she's been replaced by Caitlin Elam. And Caitlin will have a chance to introduce herself, I think, in just a few minutes.
Great, welcome David. Hey Caitlin, with that, why don't you introduce yourself?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Caitlin Elam, and I started in February, and I'll be the ginseng coordinator for Tennessee, so I'm still getting up to speed. I'm a botanist by training, and so I'm excited to hear what y'all have been doing in these working groups, and any advice you have is welcome.
Great, welcome aboard. Paul Schell.
Hello everyone, Paul Schell here with the Arkansas Department of Agriculture. We're kind of on the southern end of the range, so we don't have a lot of ginseng, but I'm the ginseng coordinator amongst several other things. It's good to see everyone.
Great, welcome Paul. Anna Lucio. I do see you're on mute. I can unmute you if it's easier. Although it's not letting me do that right at this moment. You may have to unmute yourself, Anna.
Can you hear me? We're having technical difficulties because I didn't have a microphone set up.
I can hear you now, yes.
Okay, good. Anna Lucio in Kentucky. I'm a marketing development specialist here with the Kentucky Department of Agriculture, and this is my 12th season with Ginseng, so glad to be here.
Great, welcome, Anna. I see a C. Firestone.
Hi, yes, it's Chris Firestone. I'm in Pennsylvania. I'm a botanist with DCNR Bureau of Forestry in our Division of Conservation Science and Ecological Services.
Great, welcome. A Brad Hadley.
Coordinator Melissa Brigler. Glad to be here today.
Hey, Brad, could you repeat that first part? I'm not sure. I think you might have been on mute right at the beginning there, and I missed just the first part of where you're from.
Yes, I'm from Missouri, the Missouri Department of Conservation, and I'm in the Enforcement Division.
Excellent, welcome. I'm not sure, let's see, who else? Keith Tenor? I cannot hear you, Keith, if you're talking. You're not on mute. If you are on the webinar, looks like you are, feel free to use the chat if you need to reach out to get, see if I can help you. Let's go, while we're waiting for Keith, let's go to Trent Stinson.
Hi, I'm Trent Stinson, DNR law enforcement, 16 years as a conservation officer and first webinar.
Great, welcome. Trina Morris.
Hi, Trina Morris, Georgia Department of Natural Resources. I think Lisa Cruz pretty much introduced us. I assist her with our ginseng program.
Great. Melissa Brigler.
And I've been coordinating the ginseng program since 2009.
All right. Trying to look through the list. Hatlixer.
I think this is probably me, Hannah Texler. I am with the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources. I'm a plant ecologist with our Minnesota Biological Survey.
Excellent, welcome. And seeing who I may have missed, there's a GE Guard.
Hi, it's Debbie Jaguar from the Wisconsin Department of Ag, Trade, and Consumer Protection. I'm the program manager of the cultivated ginseng program here in the state.
Great, welcome. All right, I think we're getting near the end. There are a couple folks that it's only showing your phone number, so I'm not sure your name. There's a 443 number that's showing up.
Hello, everybody. That's probably me. This is Steve Bell, Maryland Department of Agriculture. I am the Ginseng Management Program Coordinator. Been so since the first of the year. I replaced Bob Trumbull, who retired after about 30 years. And I also do nursery inspection. And while I have this opportunity, I want to thank everyone that put in so much work on these working groups, especially with regulatory, because they did a lot more than I did. So thank you.
Great, welcome. And then there's one other number that's a 317 area code.
Yeah, this is Chris Ogle, Special Agent with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service here in Indiana.
Great, welcome. And so I guess at this point, I'm going to open it up to see if I missed anyone. when I ran down that list. Okay, so it sounds like we've got everyone introduced. On our agenda, I've kind of already given my opening remarks. I'm Deb Hahn, International Relations Director with the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies. Part of what I do is supporting state agencies on CITES issues, and happy to be hosting this webinar today. If you have any trouble hearing, please reach out. And then also remember, a lot of you are muted, so we'll need to unmute when you have a discussion. I'm going to turn it over to Carolyn Caldwell for some opening remarks, and then we'll turn it over to Fish and Wildlife Service to facilitate us through the agenda. Carolyn?
Thanks, Deb. I don't have lengthy opening remarks, but I do want to say it's been a real pleasure watching this group over the past 2 years pull this together. It's quite an opportunity to make some lasting changes that will definitely result in sustainable and long-term survival of the species in the wild and sustainable trade for the species internationally. So again, I just want to say what a great job you guys have all done, and from so many different states and various state agencies, it's very impressive work. So I look forward to the outcomes today.
Great, thanks, Carolyn. So I just popped the agenda onto the screen. I'm assuming everyone has it, but just wanted to put it up there for those that may have missed it over email when Rose sent it out. Elena, I'll turn it over to you now. If you need anything from me, please let me know. Otherwise, I'll let you guys start the discussion and we'll get going.
Okay, thank you, Deb and Carolyn. I just wanted to say that, you know, Rose usually facilitates these meetings, and she sends her apologies. She got pulled to a last-minute meeting that she really needed to go to. So I will try to facilitate the group through this. And I wanted to just echo some of the thoughts from both Carolyn and Deb about the tremendous amount of work that's been done by these 4 working groups. Rose had sent out the reports, and there's an incredible amount of work that was done and an incredible amount of thought that went into this. So I think that's just greatly appreciated and goes a long way in just moving things forward in relationship to how we manage ginseng. So I just wanted to thank everybody for that. It's very impressive. And so you can see the agenda up there. And so the way that this has been set up is that the working groups will do their presentation and present their recommendations. And we'll have a short discussion and hopefully an adoption by the group. And when we talk about adoption by the larger group, I guess it's that the group agrees that this is a way to move forward. And right now we do have, as Deb mentioned, the presentations in a PowerPoint slide for the biology working group and the regulatory working group. When we get to outreach and law enforcement, as Deb had stated, if you do have a PowerPoint that we can put up on the screen for folks to take a look at with your recommendations, that would be fantastic. And if not, we can, you know, you can present those recommendations for the group to discuss. But we'll go to those points and see what's available at that time. So not to take up more time, I guess we'll start with the biology working group recommendation, and that's going to be presented by Pat Ford. Oh, Pat?
Okay. I was co-lead of the biology working group with Melissa Mosier from Ohio, who has since moved on to another position within the Ohio DNR. And the working group members consisted of Melissa Brigger from Missouri, Douglas Cox from Menominee Indian Tribe of Wisconsin, Jason Denham from New York, Chris Firestone from Pennsylvania, Lisa Cruz from Georgia, Hannah Texler from Minnesota, and Bob Tremblay from Maryland, who also has since moved on. But we were tasked with two priority issues, basically to look at what protocols states and tribes are using to monitor ginseng populations, and then what are possible funding sources to continue to monitor ginseng. And the way we tackled this, we developed a questionnaire, 13 questions that we sent out to the 20 state tribe and programs, and we compiled the responses that we received, and based upon those responses, we decided that it would be best to approach this by developing, having a standardized monitoring protocol for the states and tribe to use to monitor wild ginseng populations. And that effort was basically taken on by Lisa and Hannah of the working group, and they developed two types of surveying, high level one and a level one and a level two. And the working group determined that the level one provided the best data collection for the limited resources that programs have, and still provide enough data that you could trend and monitor ginseng over time. And so that would probably be our central recommendation, is that we as a group agree to develop a standardized monitoring protocol, and then we offered level one as a model to use. And there's more detail about the protocols and the questionnaire and whatnot in our final report. And then to tackle the priority issue 2 with the funding sources, we created a list of possible funding sources. But if there's any questions about more detail on the level 1 monitoring protocol, I would turn it over to Lisa and Hannah, and they can add more information about that.
Lisa or Hannah, do you have anything to add?
Mm-hmm. Hey Pat, this is Lisa. I apologize to the group because I didn't review what we had come up with as some guidelines for the type of data that need to be collected for level 1 and 2. I didn't review that, so I don't have much detail in my mind right now that I can summarize for you all. But we did have some ideas of the types of variables that would be most efficient and most critical to collect, and then ones that would be helpful, if possible, that could share information about the types of ginseng communities and habitats where the plants are occurring over time. We relied heavily on Dr. Oh gosh, Jim's work from West Virginia, and he has a really nice protocol available already that we felt could be modified and could assist with developing, a full, our standardized protocol. I had a lot to take from. So, sorry, that's about all I have on my mind right now. If Hannah has more information.
I could add just a little bit, and I too, Lisa, didn't have time to do too much reviewing. I took a quick look at it before our meeting, and it may be a quick way to summarize the level 1 versus 2 is that the level 1 survey is really just getting at population sizes. It's a quick count of numbers of plants, and so you select sites, and I think maybe areas within those sites that would be similar sizes that you would use for each site, and count the number of plants. And so it's quick. It doesn't require any great amount of knowledge. All you have to do is be able to identify ginseng from the leaves. But level 2 gets a little bit more into productivity, and so you're going out there at a time when you can actually see flowers or early fruit, so you get a little bit more information about whether they're flowering and fruiting. And there's also I can't remember, there were 3 different levels, I think, and the highest intensity, we didn't really go into a lot of details, but the highest intensity, if you had the funding and the staffing, would be ideal, because that's more of a demographic census over time, where you're really looking at detailed information about the sizes of the plants, the numbers of plants, how many flowers and fruits they're producing. But as you can imagine, that's pretty expensive and difficult to do. So ideally, some programs might do that kind of intensive survey, but the reason that the highest priority was level 1 is that all of us are having trouble finding funding to do this, and we thought that this would mean that would actually get done. So that's all I really have to say.
Right, and our report that we've submitted has more detail about the level 1 and level 2 monitoring protocols, and also we did include Dr. Jim McGraw's monitoring protocol that he's been using for over 15 years. So that's included in the report. And then a couple examples of Ohio and Kentucky, what they're using, and also a survey form that Maryland implements. So all that information is in the working report.
Can I add one thing, Pat?
Sure.
One thing that, and this is largely a Georgia perspective, I think, but I believe I am speaking for some of the other states who don't have any, who don't have resources for field monitoring of ginseng. I feel that the data that we collect in our ginseng program from the dealers and from the shipment certificates is not able to accurately determine the conservation status of ginseng in the state. And I feel that to really get to the point of whether of the actual status of ginseng, some monitoring is really critical. I think we need to tie what we're seeing in the ginseng economy to what's happening with the populations on the ground as best as possible. We have a lot of anecdotal information that indicates that ginseng is declining, and I feel concern for the status of ginseng in Georgia. And I feel like we really need to back it up with hard data to understand the effects of the trade. And understanding the effects of the trade will also give further justification for outreach efforts and for changing regulatory efforts and the laws about ginseng to better reflect the condition of the species on the ground.
Okay, anything else from the biology working group that you want to add at this point before we get into a more open discussion with everyone? If not, I just want to, for those folks, I know Rose had sent out all the reports, and the standardized protocols, if you have the reports in front of you, kind of the primary objectives for level 1 monitoring start on page 23, and 24 shows the secondary objectives for the level 2 monitoring. But from what Pat had indicated in her talk, the recommendation from this group, and Pat, correct me if I'm wrong here, is that kind of a way to move forward on this is to implement standardized monitoring protocols, at least at the level 1 model as a minimum.
Yeah, it'd be nice if we could at least all agree that a standardized protocol is necessary and then move towards implementing level 1. And level one, we're open to discussion about further ways to maybe revise that or add additional components or elements. But I would hope that we'd at least be able to agree that, as Lisa just stated, that some type of field monitoring protocol is necessary. And then once we start collecting data, to be able to share that data across, political state boundary lines and whatnot, and get a real sense of the status of ginseng.
So any thoughts on that from folks on the call? Do you agree that this might be a good way forward? Are folks on mute?
Yeah, this is Deb. Just a quick reminder that if you are on mute and want to speak, unmute yourself.
I was waiting for the masses to talk. It's Ron from Ohio. Melissa worked for me, so obviously I knew what she had going on, and I knew the monitoring, the stuff that I was doing was some pretty darn good stuff, and I concur with the assessment that you guys have put out there and some of the pass forward that you guys have discussed. So have my endorsement.
Hi, this is Melissa Brigler. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm also on the biology working group, and a few minutes ago I had to step from my desk for just 2 minutes and got back to this conversation, but I did want to, I think this is what you all were talking about, and I apologize for stepping out for a minute, but, we had come up with, a recommendation to develop a standard monitoring protocol. So when we got into discussing all the complexities of the various programs among the states and all their funding capabilities and things, it got to be a very complicated issue quick of what can we find that's actually meaningful information and what is feasible to ask all the states to do on a standardized basis. And in grappling with that issue, we really, I think as a group, was just saying, well, let's just get to the recommendation that, yes, it does need to have, we need to have some sort of monitoring associated. And as far as, going forward with that, and then dealing with the issue of how are we going to standardize this across all these various programs is definitely going to be a challenge. But, aside from putting out examples of what other states are doing or have done, it's hard to get past that point, but I think just getting to, there does need to be a monitoring established somehow. I think that's the main thing for now.
Right, and I think that's part of what we're trying to get at in terms of this particular issue, and really all of them, is that the group agrees that this is a way forward, knowing that we might not necessarily know where the funding's coming from or the details, specifics, but that having a standardized monitoring protocol is something that needs to be done, and that this is a way that we should be moving forward on this issue, and knowing that there'll be next steps.
This is Rhonda from West Virginia. With Dr. McGraw being with WVU, we've assisted him with setting up his first batch of monitoring. So we definitely agree that there needs to be monitoring protocols that everybody has.
Yeah. Who was that was speaking? I'm sorry.
This is
it was hard to. Oh, well, yeah. Okay. Is there anybody who disagrees that this is a way forward? Okay. So what I propose is that we feel that the recommendations for the biology working group is a way to move forward, and maybe we can finalize that report.
It is finalized.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're done.
The protocol of it.
Yeah.
Okay. So then if there's no dissension on that, I think we can move forward. I'll put it up again if anybody has any issues that they want to express before we go to the next group. Patricia?
So just to clarify, the second part of that recommendation was to move forward on some form of standard monitoring, at least at the level 1, and to the extent that it looks like, you know, some states do already have their own sort of monitoring protocol. It doesn't sound like you're asking people to use a certain format per se, but to at least hit certain elements. And so is that what would also be agreed upon from today, so that perhaps in this next season, when the next monitoring is able to be done, it doesn't have to be done in that format, but if they could articulate which aspects of the level 1/level 2 protocols that they're responding to or that they're using to monitor. I mean, would it, because there's the level 1 and there's the level 2, and there's certain questions, and so to the extent that some states already do something.
Yeah, this is Hannah. I think that would be just fine. I don't think we'd want anyone to drop a protocol they've been using over the years and start something new and then not be able to compare their old data to their current and future data. So I think your proposal is a really good one. I would certainly support that.
Anyone else?
And this is Melissa Brigler again. I'd also just probably add, like, for that level 1, you know, we could, like Hannah said, I mean, just, you know, if they've already got their program set up, and just to keep doing that, if that'll give the information, you know, like in a standardized format to where we can compare one state with the other states or combine the data to see what ginseng is doing range-wide. I mean, I think that would work just fine.
Yeah, this is Pat. I would agree. Yeah.
Would the idea be next year would be the first year?
Anyone else? Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Going on to the regulatory working groups. The co-chairs are Cliff and Brad. I don't know who's going to be presenting.
Oh, this is Brad. I'd be glad to talk about it. It's very straightforward.
Okay.
Did you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So our group, like every other group, had a certain set of challenges and obstacles that they were to address, and we spent, I think, several hours on the phone and off hours from the phone. I think we had 10 meetings. We generally came up with 3. We just wrote them as resolutions. If you've got the copies of the full resolutions, there's a whole bunch of whereases and things like that. We weren't sure what format we were going to go with, so we just went with that. The gist of it is that the first resolution is that we want all harvesters to be physically identified with a license, permit, or other equivalent process that the state can authorize, or the tribe, wherever it's going to be harvested. So, you know, whether it's a ginseng permit issued by the regulatory agency, or that state has a larger process of legislative change to make regulations. Perhaps it could be use the driver's license. At any rate, we need some kind of a identifier. And if the state doesn't do that, then it's going to be negatively factored into the non-detriment finding. We also looked at, you know, Missouri's different. We can enact changes through orders of rulemaking based on our statute. So we can do something like that relatively quickly, but other states said you have to open up the legislature. So we felt 4 to 5 years from the time of any kind of a memorandum of understanding or advice might be sufficient to make that happen. So that was our first resolution. It's just generally to require some kind of a identifier. The second then was, the second had to do with the green or fresh or wet root trade that, you know, it's burgeoning. It seems to be anyway. We had a lot of discussion about this. Every possible philosophy, I think, was discussed, and you know, from the room of being, you know, we shouldn't let them have green at all to we need to let them do all they can. So we kind of settled back into a deal of, well, okay, so let's kind of monitor how that is by a comparison of total amount of green roots as a percentage to kind of see if it's not just anecdotal, but in fact the green root trade is a growing part of the ginseng economy. And I think may probably from the data that's reported to Pat from all the states, that probably shouldn't be too big of an issue to provide some kind of comparison. That was resolution 2. I think we had a couple of charts that we had done in Missouri just to kind of take a look at it, but we can look at those some other time, or you can look at them in the handouts or the attachments. Want to do resolution 3 now? Oh, there they are. You can go back one if everybody wants to take a look at that real quick. So not a lot of detail here. It's just a quick, dirty look to see what's happening with the wet to total purchase ratio over time. And again, that's from whatever, the last 20 years or so in Missouri. Okay, and the final resolution. Yeah, so we realized in talking amongst ourselves and looking at everybody else's forms that, you know, nobody has the same nomenclature for issuing certificate numbers. The certificates don't look the same. We're thinking also, you know, when those leave the state and some other inspector looks and they're having to look at 19 different forms to see exactly where the towns or whatever is. So we wanted to try to standardize that as much as possible. So we settled on this resolution to be, the number will be standardized, non-repetitive nomenclature, has a prefix, 2-letter abbreviation of the state of origin in the first, followed by the last 2 digits of ginseng harvest year. For instance, in Missouri would be Mo 19, and then the asterisk would represent alpha or alphanumeric sequence of whatever determined by the state or tribe. And not having that again would be a negative factor as far as the non-detriment finding. So again, for us in Missouri, that's just a pretty much change in our rule and wouldn't take too long to do. For other states, it may take longer, but nevertheless, we did canvass all states and got certificate forms and kind of mashed them up into a template of what we thought would work. I think that was even submitted back to most states, and they felt like it would be would work. Somebody else that's on the committee wants to speak up there and correct me, that's fine. But anyway, I think we said 1 to 2 years from a memorandum of general advice would be sufficient time to implement that. That's really the basics, the 3 things that we addressed, and I'd be happy to try to answer any questions. Cliff, Melissa Bridger was involved in this too, I think, and so anybody else from our work group, and some of, like others, have retired and moved on, but those of us left would be glad to try to answer any questions.
And the next slide is actually your example of a certificate.
Okay, great.
Does anybody else in the regulatory working group have anything they want to add to Brad's?
Yeah, this is Cliff Horton, Fish and Wildlife Management Authority. Just want to thank Brad for leading the group. He was tireless and organized, and all the members. A lot of great participation. I really appreciate everybody's involvement in our group. Thanks.
This is Robin. Robin, I helped on that group But we found out through some of the law enforcement with the adding of the state at the beginning, the law enforcement guys may not see the actual certificate. They'll just see a form that has all the certificate numbers on it. So we thought that would be a great idea for putting the states on the front to help them out so they know where that, where those certificates were coming from and were listed on the dealer reports. So that was one of the good things. We've already changed ours.
Thank you, Robin. And Missouri, we've already made that change too. We're having Mo on all ours now, so it's an improvement just from our discussion.
And this is Pat. I would say after looking at individual state forms, which are across the board on detail of information, I think this is a great idea to have one standardized state and tribe certificate that is legible and easily to read by anyone that picks it up.
Okay, anybody else on the group before we go into the general discussion? So if we can go back to resolution 1, and maybe we can start the discussion there about whether there's any thoughts on what's recommended there. So Deb, if you can go put resolution 1 back up on the board. Thank you. So just any general thoughts on this first resolution from anybody?
Yes, here, this is Paul Shell with Arkansas. I brought this licensing of diggers up within my agency after returning from the meeting 2 years ago, and the general response was just immediate pushback as to passing anything like this through our legislature. We're dealing with a bunch of interesting characters, most of which don't know anything at all. So passing a law through them is going to be a definite uphill battle on that. There might come a time sometime in the future that new regulations might be a little easier to pass. I don't see that happening in my lifetime, but so I'd like some input on how this can be approached when you're dealing with a legislature that is going to be strongly negative to anything that they interpret as a new regulation on individuals or businesses.
You know, one recommendation that I have, and I'll let other folks talk, but, you know, I can recognize that there may be, you know, difficulty with a lot of states, similar to what you're expressing, and you know, maybe what we can talk about as well when we talk about these resolutions is how we can maybe soften the language a little bit, where we can come to consensus on, like, the ideas. And, you know, for example, you know, maybe instead of shall be, you know, encourage, and kind of soften this a little bit. I don't know if that will help or not, but something I wanted to throw out, if that would be helpful for folks. But I open it to other folks who have some opinions on Resolution 1.
This is Pat. I would say, Paul. Sorry.
Go ahead.
Paul, I would say, see, on your question, and I'm not a state employee, but I would, as you know, in Arkansas, in the northern western corner of Arkansas is a lot of Forest Service land, and Mamie talked with the National Forest and have, if they could advocate on the benefits to have a state digger's license where the National Forest does not allow a harvest, so they might be in favor of that, and they could advocate the the benefits of having a state digger license to conserve the populations on national forest land.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah, this is Chris Firestone. I think also it would be helpful to hear from the other states that currently do this and how many other states currently do it and what the pros and cons are. And hopefully the pros outweigh the cons, and that we could use that too as a way to hopefully convince others that this is a good idea.
This is Robin.
Thanks, Chris.
Oh.
Go ahead.
The years we were working on this, our DNR got passed through our legislature where the ginseng dealers, when they sell their ginseng, they have to get a copy of their driver's license, which basically is part of the other equivalent process. That was going on unbeknownst to me until it was up in the legislature here in West Virginia. But with that, a lot of our dealers were wondering why, but a lot of our dealers are also recycling. And part of their regulations is they have to get copies of driver's license when people sell copper or other metals. So it just sort of fell right into what they were already doing. But I did get a little few that didn't like it, but they have went with the regulations, and so far so good. 1 year out.
Anyone else that has this in place?
Yeah, the states currently that issue digger's license are Wisconsin, Maryland, and Illinois. And I know we have someone from both Maryland and Wisconsin.
Hey, this is Melissa. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hey, I was thinking that too. You know, if you don't have to have a legislative change to just require at least the driver's license number, I mean, even a copy is even better. But I mean, in lieu of a harvest permit, you know, you're still at least getting some individual information from each digger. You're not relying on some, you know, potentially bogus name they might be giving the dealer and everything. There's at least a little more accountability on that. And then you're not, depending, I guess, on your state's, you know, laws, but I don't, you know, it at least sounds like Wisconsin didn't have to change any laws or anything just to require the dealer to supply driver's license information. So I was just thinking for Arkansas, that might at least be better than nothing, and then it's not like you have to go through that whole process either.
Yeah, that's a good point.
That sounds very good.
What if somebody doesn't drive?
Yeah. Well, I don't know.
Okay, so this is Brad again. I think, you know, that's why we wrote that in as equivalent process. So a driver's license, resident license. I mean, we can always say, what if somebody doesn't do this? But, you know, in reality, we also know that it's not always put in the harvester's name. So if somebody doesn't have a driver's license, somebody's going to bring them to that to sell it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Name associated with them. So, you know, I think we were anticipating this, you know, like, well, how much are the permits going to cost and all that? And one way to get around all that is to say, just have them identified. And that can be an already issued state identified or identification card, whatever it may be. That's up to the states to decide. Arkansas could say your driver's license or your state ID.
And then that would be recorded on the document that the dealer fills out when he is purchasing or she is purchasing roots from diggers.
I bought 2 pounds from Jim Smith in such and such address, Arkansas.
Mm-hmm. Well, as of right now, we do on those documents, the dealer will record the name and the town. Some of them go as far as to recording their physical address. And I'd be all for having diggers pay $5. I mean, for one thing, we have a way to track them, and another would be we have a way to communicate with them, so that we can make sure that they know the laws, whether they follow them or not. And also, it'd give them some ownership and hopefully maybe make them think twice about following the laws. You know,
right.
so
and that's a good point.
I'm
Reach out to
definitely,
the group.
yeah, I'm for this, but I'm just trying to figure out how I could get this passed through my legislature, which is
maybe what a good thing to do on this resolution, because there's really 3 parts to it. So it sounds like from the discussion that folks are pretty much supportive of the first part, where the harvesters will be physically identified by license permit or some sort of ID. So maybe what would be good is if we went through these one by one, because it seems like the sticking point on this resolution may be securing the legislative part of it. So maybe let's just start on that. And I'm getting the sense if we start on that first one about getting a license, it sounds like some people already do that, and others are supportive of kind of going down that road. So is that a fair assessment that that first one is pretty much the group agrees that that's kind of a process that we should move forward with?
I'd encourage any of the other law enforcement officers in the meeting to throw in what they hear also. All us or some of you guys, I know have dealt with some of these issues that not having any kind of identifier allows.
This is Chris from Pennsylvania. I'm not a law enforcement. I'm a biologist, botanist. But we have tried to reach out to some of our harvesters from the information that was recorded, that the dealers recorded on the transaction forms. And probably 30 to 40% of the addresses and names came back as undeliverable because of false information. So by having them identify with a license in the beginning during their transaction would definitely help us to be in better communication with the harvesters. Because at this point we really have no idea who they are if we don't have the correct addresses and names.
Any other thoughts on that first recommendation?
This is Chris Ogle, the Fish and Wildlife Service agent in Indiana. Brad, of course, you and I worked together on that long-term investigation that you had in Missouri, and the problem I thought was that there's no requirement on the dealer to verify the information that he's getting. They just ask them to provide a name in so many states. They do that, but as Ms. Firestone just said, the information's wrong anyway. So at some point, if you can only regulate the dealers, there needs to be some type of enforcement in regards to that they have to verify that the information's accurate, because right now we can't hold them accountable for what information they're gathering.
This is Lisa in Georgia. I just want to say that in Georgia, I believe our perspective is, from my understanding of it, echoes what the group is discussing. It's a complex issue. I personally don't have the authority to say that we can meet these recommendations, but I do know that our section chief is in support of the idea, but getting there, as you all know, is complicated. Probably, it seems like you all are suggesting various small steps which may be appropriate to your states. It would be a process of our state working on small steps towards better documentation of the diggers that we can take that with the infrastructure and resources that we have. And right now, any change that would require a change through of a legislative change is not feasible. But I believe that we can work to find small steps towards better documentation of our diggers. We do have support from our dealers for that sort of process. I have talked to them. So we do have support from our customers. But it will take some time because of our limited staff. So it's complex and will take time.
It's Ron from Ohio. Specifically speaking, the resolution 1, and we talked about this at our meeting. We do talk about ginseng in other meetings, and it's kind of across the board. In Ohio, the last time we checked, about 50% of our records were bogus. And we still get a Mickey Mouse thrown in there every once in a while to have some fun. We are trying to work towards a harvester's license or digger's license. Definitely need some help from some outside sources. It's not something we'll be able to push ourselves. Help from AHPA or some other external group. Certainly something that's been discussed, but definitely a lot of bogus records and hard to find folks, and all of the commendable work by your group, Brad, for all of you guys. It's going to echo Chris and I'll have law enforcement, I think, but kind of on the same line. But good stuff. Just continue to work and share information.
You're breaking up a little bit.
Oh, sorry about that. Did you catch anything I said?
It kind of faded at the end, but the beginning part was okay.
Oh, okay. Just commending the work that Brad and the group did there, and the law enforcement report, I guess, is very similar to the resolution. We see the same thing.
So is it fair to say that, at least just breaking down this resolution, that the group could agree that trying to physically identify some of the harvesters through license permit or whatever process is something that you can agree to, and not taking into like how at this point, but that's something that you think is a good idea and we could move forward with for at least this part of the resolution, just taking it piece by piece.
I certainly do. From my perspective, yes. I think you'll have to be careful on, you want to be careful how you tell everybody they're going to do something. It's better probably to make it clear that diggers need to be identified and verified. Kind of let them know how they're going to do that rather than shove a process down the throat.
Yeah, and maybe that goes back to, I don't know if this is helpful or not, but what I had raised earlier about maybe when we say shall be, at least start with, words like encouraged, which is a little softer. And for at least some of the states that might have a problem with that, it would be easier to kind of move that forward.
Yeah, I would agree.
I have a quick.
I think you dropped off.
Can y'all hear me? It's Anna.
No,
Yes?
There you are. You were very faint.
Good, because I'm, like I said, having mic issues. Okay, so one thing I wanted to add, for Kentucky last year, over the years, have analyzed our transaction sizes. While I don't capture names of harvesters, I at least capture at least every
Yeah, it's hard to hear. I don't know if anybody else can hear you, but we're having trouble on our end here.
Better?
A little bit.
Okay, sorry, we're having microphone issues today. So if it's better for me to just put it in the chat box, I can. But for last year, we instituted a new policy based on looking at historic transaction records of the sizes of what we captured throughout the whole program history. And we noticed that most of our transactions are 5 pounds or less. And so we implemented that anyone who has a transaction 5 pounds or more must provide additional identification so that we can verify that they are who they say they are. And so we're going to be proposing a regulation change pretty soon, and will require driver's license at the time of sale or some type of state issue ID. So we are in the process of implementing this due to the work. So Kentucky is supportive.
It looks like Melissa, maybe you had your hand up. I don't know if that was from before. I just saw on the participant list.
Dang it.
Are you there, Melissa?
Hello?
Yep.
No.
I hear you.
Oh, can you hear me? Okay. Hang on. Can anybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm sorry. I'm having all kinds of technical difficulties. Somehow I got kicked off the meeting. But you can hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I wanted to make a point too about the pushback that some states get from legislature and changing legislature, because probably Missouri is like a lot of other states that we don't regulate plants on private land, generally speaking. I mean, ginseng is the only plant that's not endangered, federally listed as endangered, that we regulate the take of on private land. And the only reason that is there in place is because of the CITES restriction. So, if Fish and Wildlife Service were to come out like they did with the 5-year rule and say, look, it's got to be a 3-pronged plant, you have to set a legal, harvest regulations and all that. I mean, we've been regulating ginseng since the early 80s, and that's really the only reason why, it's in our regulations to this day. So I don't know what's going to end up with these resolutions and things, but even if they came back and said, bare minimum, you need to have a driver's license number or a social security number. If that came from Fish and Wildlife Service to the states, that would be what we need, really, is that backing. Because then all of a sudden it becomes, not us trying to convince them. It's a restriction set by the Fish and Wildlife Service. So hopefully these regulations will, kind of trickle down to that point. Did you get that?
Yes. Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Okay, good. That's it.
All right. Well, this is Deb Hahn, and I don't hear Elena right now, but I don't know if she's on mute or not. But I guess, it does sound like there, as Elena was starting to mention before, maybe there's some need to soften this resolution a little, because some states are going to have some challenges moving this forward for a variety of reasons. And so I guess, it would be nice to soften the language a little, in particular in there, because there is a severely negative factor, that statement in there for the issuance of a non-detriment finding. And Elena says we are not on mute. Well, I don't know why I can't hear you. Let's see, maybe I can. to do something else. I don't know, Elena. It does not show that you're on mute. I agree. So I'm going to just try unmute all and hit that button and see if that works for you, Elena.
Can you hear us now?
Yep.
Okay, great. Okay. Yeah, I agree that, some of these, as we go through, do need to, I was trying to get to at least agreeing with the principle of the first one. And maybe instead of shall be, we could do encourage. I agree when we were going to get to that next one, with the non-detriment finding, and that's something that it's a very strong statement, and one of the things that we could say there, is that we would consider whether that authorization exists or not in our non-detriment finding, but probably not agree to the language that it would severely negatively, it's a severely negative factor. So I think that some of this can be kind of modified a little bit to be softened. And when folks also go back to, upper management with some of these, it might be a little bit better if it wasn't couched in very strong terms like that. But what I wanted to do is just see if, at least the license part of it, whether folks agree that this is a way that we should move forward, just, however we do it, but this is a good concept and this is a positive concept that we should move forward with. And I got the sense from what people were saying that it is.
Yeah, Elena, maybe if there's anyone that doesn't feel like the concept is okay, maybe put that in the group chat. And if you can't find the group chat, then we can, feel free to speak. But if anyone has any concerns, that may be the easiest way.
This is Keith Hagenward in Virginia. The first paragraph, personally, I agree that we need to have some licensing. We do not do that in Virginia. I'm kind of concerned, and in talking to our people here, about having the dealers enforce the regulation of, or the need to have that permit, if you will. But my main question is the second paragraph. What if we don't get it passed by the legislation? What's going to happen?
Oh, are you talking about the non-detriment finding?
Yes. In other words, if we can't get it past the legislature, and the legislators, I agree that it's an education process with the legislators, but they're going to respond to what the harvesters want. If they get kickback from the harvesters,
right,
it's going to be difficult for us to get it through the legislation.
Yeah.
But if we're unable to get that permit, and again, we do this for fishing, we do it for hunting, we do it for all kinds of things.
Right.
I see a need for it. I see that it's reasonable. But if if a state is unable to get it passed through the legislation, what's the end result? Does this now become mandatory, and that all of a sudden now we're not able to export ginseng?
I think this is something that we can have further conversations on, because I think this is a pretty important factor. But in terms of non-detriment finding, I think we can soften that language a little bit. That's what's here in terms of that it shall be mandatory, because I think the reality is that some states are not going to be able to secure this through legislation. And, it's just something that we can say we can, commit to consider this in the non-detriment finding. But that's why I was trying to break it down a little bit, because I think that we go from, in this resolution, we go from kind of a simpler concept of just trying to identify by license to, the non-detriment finding, to a very, I think, hard sell in some cases to secure legislation. So, I think on this one, one of the things, my suggestion is that we soften some of the language on this. But I know that, Rose and I had talked a little bit before this meeting about maybe on some of these kind of more difficult situations or ideas, that maybe this is something we can also put in a parking lot for a later time. I think that the legislative part of this is something that probably would fit well in going into a parking lot, and we can, Rose and I talked about having another call maybe in September for any issues that are in that parking lot. So, that would be kind of where I would recommend that this particular resolution go, at least for, that third paragraph.
If I could also ask some of the states that have other categories besides the wild, specifically the wild simulated, if they could address, if they're able to distinguish between wild and wild simulated, and should this be for all ginseng as opposed to just the wild?
Ours is for, this is Robin, ours is for all ginseng categories. And they go to sell it, whatever category, they get a copy of the driver's license. Doesn't matter which classification it is, wild, wild simulated, woodland, or cultivated. If they're selling it to a dealer, the dealer gets a copy of their driver's license.
This is Brad, Missouri again, and Melissa and I are actually working on some of our regulations now, and that's one of the things that we're looking for Missouri to change, is just eliminate any distinction between types. So just like Robin said, if it's ginseng and it's going to a dealer, it's ginseng, regardless of type.
That's not.
Okay, Anna?
Yes, on that, since we do have 4 different categories on our export certificate, Chris's question was, can you tell the difference? No, just like West Virginia, most of that is self-reported. And it seems like most of the time that would be the way the growing method is regulated is one thing. It's the character of the root is ultimately how these dealers are always going to market it, regardless of what the paperwork says. And that's for what states reported on an export certificate. If it meets a higher level type, say Ohio root, for instance, or North Carolina root, it's always going to be blended in regardless of what state it came from originally.
Anyone else? Okay, so at this point, what I would recommend is that I think we have some agreement on the first part about the licenses or some sort of identification. And for the sake of time, because we've got quite a bit to go and it's 2:45, I think that there needs to be more discussion on at least the legislative part, you know, and maybe kind of softening some of this language. So I would propose that we move on to, we put that in a parking lot, and we have a call on that in September, and move on to resolution 2. Okay. So Brad, can you just go through this real quick again?
This is the green roof. I kind of get a name. Yeah.
Can folks hear me?
I hear you.
Yeah. Okay. So Brad, do you want to?
You want to put resolution 2 back out? I mean, if it's just dealt with green.
Yeah, resolution 2 is up, Brad.
Okay, I'm not seeing it, but that's okay. Resolution 2 just says each state needs to review past year's data to quantify the proportion of the harvest that is green, and annually monitor that total amount, document its effect on the conservation of ginseng. Relative to the current concerns listed in the above part of that resolution, I don't think it's going to be a complex thing. I think it could be pulled, and again, just not me thinking, we've discussed it among our group, but I think everybody collects the same info, and it'd be pretty easy to pull those out into a couple of little Excel charts like the attachment. So recognizing again that there was everything from let's not let them, you know, sell green ginseng to, you know, that should be the only thing that they sell. So we've just tried to hit on a medium here that said law enforcement and others, even some of the industry recognizes that it's a growing thing. Maybe we should be keeping a better track of what potential impacts it might have if the proportion's changing. So we want to know if the proportion's changing over time.
I have a question from Georgia. This is Lisa. And it's been a while since we discussed this. I remember your review of the green ginseng issue a couple years ago, and I've really forgotten. Can you explain why the concern behind this resolution? What is the significance of an increasing proportion of green?
So part of it is the end user, the growing market for green because of the difference in the end user. One of the issues with it is it, you know, sold immediately. That they dig it today, they sell it today, and as far as botanicals, it's, you know, higher value than anything else. So in essence, there's cash in their day every day. It's very attractive for impoverished people, people that might be suffering opiate addiction, other drug addictions, and it possibly is increasing the number of people that are actually harvesting ginseng. That puts additional harvest on it. Those kind of people wouldn't be the ones that are generally concerned with stewardship and sustainability to begin with. They're probably more likely to take anything they can, small, underage, whatever. And it's also possible that they could be digging early to fill orders at the first day of the season. So there's a lot of issues that come to bear on this. So that's kind of the issues that drove our discussion on this. And does that explain a little bit for you?
So an increase in the harvest of green, or sale of green relative to dry, could mean that it could indicate just it's a correlative with an increased black market, or
not necessarily black. That market might already be there. In other words, the folks that there may be more folks in the ginseng user community that are wanting green ginseng, but because they want it, it will be met. It'll be filled. And so if it If it becomes known, it's like the price of aluminum goes up, then you have a lot more people scrapping. So now the price and the availability of this green ginseng is known, and how quickly you can get cash for it. That puts more pressure on all the populations, wherever they may be.
This is Pat. Can I add something to that?
Absolutely.
I would add a fresh root, a green root, has 3 times the amount of water content than a dry root. So if you're getting certified root as green, you just say 100 pounds, that it's certified green weight. Time it gets to export, maybe a month, 2 months later, that 30 pounds of ginseng, it's a way of laundering more ginseng root, because you don't, there's variations of the water content in the root. And so depending how much water content it is, ideally a person could weigh it with the most freshest water content, and you can even add water content to the root by just keeping it refrigerated under optimal conditions. And then the time it's dried, and if it's dried really well, and that dried weight is on the export permit, but the certified weight is green. It's just a way to add in more roots to the dried weight, because it's such a variable number of what actually is the real weight of the roots to be exported. It's a way to launder more roots. And we are, just anecdotally, we are seeing I'm seeing an increase in the state reports that we are witnessing an increase in the market for this green fresh root. And even last year, the dollar value of the green root was so much higher, what a dealer was willing to pay for a pound of green root than it was previous years. So that is an indication that the market is there and it's very viable.
I mean, to be clear, green root would have to be regulated anyway. I mean, it's not like they're not allowed to regulate.
No.
The question is whether they captured the data. This is just asking.
No. The Fish and Wildlife Service requires states and tribes to certify the root and report it as either green or dry. Mm-hmm. So the states have that data. It's just now, okay, just look at the data and track it and see if in your state you are noticing that increase.
So the question is, what states are doing this right now?
Well, it's on the form, so it has to be recorded. It's just, we're seeing more green root certified, and if it gets exported as dried, it's a way to launder more roots because the number is so variable. The poundage.
But this is saying that I guess I don't, on this, it's to annually monitor the total amount of green roots to document its effect, and you're saying it's already being done.
It's been done. Look at Missouri. See that blue line? It's from 2012.
Okay.
Okay.
The states have the data. It's just, let's put it on an Excel spreadsheet and monitor it.
Do the states report the data to us?
Yes.
So to ask them to take those last few years' data, or whatever years, and put them on this spreadsheet. That's all?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a real simple process.
Okay.
So I know Paul Schell is waiting to get reconnected. He's been clipped off, apparently. Well, I guess that's going to be Deb, but...
Yeah, I'll send him. It sounds like his phone cut off, so I'll just send him the number again. I'll put it in the chat. You guys can keep going. I'll make sure he gets back in.
Okay, so is that a fair summary of Resolution 2 is just to put this on spreadsheets from the states?
Yeah, that's really all it's asking. And again, just take a look at it. Anecdotal is fine, but the numbers are there. We just need to really be looking at the numbers. our ultimate goal here is to protect the resource as a whole, not to provide convenience for people to take it away from us.
Right. Okay. Does anybody feel that's overly burdensome or have a problem with doing that? We agree that this is a way that we should move forward as a group? Or does somebody not agree?
I do think it's a good thing to do, even state by state, as a barometer to watch.
Yeah.
I mean, to help Pat on her point here. So I pulled up our report really quick, and Brad, you guys are going to target with everything. There's a reason this is happening, and it's because they can, I guess, put the screws to the system. So for Ohio, we're 2,200 pounds dry last year, 2,900 pounds wet is what was harvested, but they're only certifying 8 pounds for export of green. They're drying it down themselves. So you have legitimate folks who are wanting to buy green so they can dry it how they want it. So it's not, you get some gnarly stuff and people put stuff in dehydrators, all the things we all know. So you have a couple legitimate guys that are doing it because they want to control how the product is finished. But I think the majority of them, I said it in our meeting down there, green ginseng is the currency of Appalachia in many areas right now. And it's, there's a lot of green ginseng that trades hands because it's quick and it's easy. An illegitimate dealer can buy it in August for pennies on the pound and turn around and sell it after the season opens and make a ton of money on it. And, if I go with the 1 to 3 most people are using for that, that 2,800 pounds, 2,871 is what it actually is. It comes out to about 920 pounds. We're still about 800 pounds.
Yeah, the only thing that, again, that I would kind of interject into this is that, in terms of the non-detriment finding, we can commit to, consider whether, that's being done or not, but the severely negative factor is a little bit too harsh. So I think we need to just work on softening that language a little bit. But other than that, I would say that this is something that the group in general agrees that it's a way to move forward. So I propose that we move on to resolution number 3. And Brad, if you could just kind of, again, just a quick and dirty on resolution 3, just to remind folks what this is.
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep, now we can. Can you hear us?
Okay. Yeah, I can. And I just want to point out, too, that, and I know the language seems strong, and I know that our group struggled and worked very hard to try to come up with some language. And part of the impetus for that strong language was, again, to have something from the Fish and Wildlife that serves more as a direction to us than simply a wish list. And I understand and appreciate that it may need to be tempered down, but I do want you guys aware that we were looking for some solid directive that way. So, okay. Resolution 3 had to do with the standardized certificates of origin and the non-repetitive nomenclature that's also standardized. It includes the state of origin and the number. So Mo 19 and then a non-sequential number or a sequential number, how it is. So, again, that's another one that says adequate time, 1 to 2 years. I don't know if that's be an issue or not, but that's kind of what it's all about. Standardized certificate form, standardized number.
And we had heard earlier from at least some folks when you initially presented this that this was pretty positive format, pretty positive way to move forward. So I'd like to hear anything from anyone who either has done something similar to this or feels that this is a good way to move forward or not.
This is Paul from Illinois. Can you hear me?
Yes,
All the states,
hello.
yeah. I'm not on the Zoom, but I'm on the phone. Yeah, I would think it's a great idea, just since no one was talking, that of all the states, we're talking about all 19 states and territories and tribes having the same form. We can easily do that, by just printing it up. So we're for that.
Anybody else who may feel that this is something they don't want to move forward with, or?
It looks like Anna might have something to say. She has her hand raised in the participant list.
Can you hear me? So I like the concept, and I love us all being on the same page. There's a couple of things in the legal language I do have concern with. When we updated our forms in 2007, we did work with a law enforcement agent from U.S. Fish and Wildlife, and he wanted to make sure that the language worked for him for going through the court system. And so one thing that's missing would be following the laws pertaining to recording. In addition, harvest, sale, purchase, trade, transfer, and transport. The other thing is missing is export, that line of language. So recording and export would be something I would recommend to add in. And then my other, I got two other ones, is we do everything on a numerical pounds. So an ounce is 0.0625 ounce. So an ounce is 0.0625 pounds. And so we do everything on a strictly decimal basis and have since 2007. And that's for keystrokes, other things, and also for addition errors when we do record everything. And so we would be opposed going to a pounds and ounces format, or we would just write just pounds and not anything in the ounces side. And then the last bit is we have lots of discussion of what is wild versus art crop, and looking at the definition for CITES and in the federal language also, and at what point is it art crop and what point is it wild. And we try to distinguish that. Again, it is self-reported, but if we wanted to build something on a framework on the future, if there is something with that language, we've always broken out art crop for woods grown and cultivated. And so that was something, if that was a distinction that the committee or even you guys and U.S. Fish and Wildlife felt that was an important distinction or not. So other than that, I'm not seeing anything other, but I just want to make sure that legal language did mirror what was recommended to us.
Okay. We're back on. We were muted again, so thank you, Deb, for getting us back on.
Not the word reporting or recording.
Anna, this is Patricia at Fish and Wildlife Service. You suggested two words are missing from the form right now, and one of them, I'm not sure if you said it was the word recording or reporting.
Here for me to type, so it was recording.
Great.
I can write it out exactly how ours states. It's almost identical. We just double check. And the other word was export.
Yeah, maybe if you share that language. I don't know.
Okay, I will type it because it's easier, so that way everybody hears me and doesn't have the accent.
Yeah, so, if you have recommendations like that, I think it would be good to share it with the regulatory working group, you know, as well as, you know, the rest of the group if we have a subsequent call, in terms of maybe modifying this certificate, or this, the information form. But I think that, I get the sense that just, the group agrees that, you know, this is kind of a useful thing to have, and would help, help in the state. So I would say that, you know, Resolution 3, we move forward with that.
Supporting in principle with the idea that maybe the format
Right.
should be further.
We need to modify that a little bit with folks that might have some suggested changes. And so before this, the regulatory group report gets finalized, maybe some of these, kind of the softening of the language, as well as maybe some additions to the form, can be provided and incorporated into the report.
I have one question, Paul Shell from Arkansas. The certificates are issued by our field people as they're interacting with the dealers. So as far as a sequential number on the certificates, that's going to be really difficult because when Joe issues a certificate, it's going to be his certificate number 1, and when Susan issues a certificate, she's going to be issuing certificate number 1 too. So, like, maybe I know this is just simply logistical, but maybe if I had a numerical designation for each dealer, each licensed dealer, so this could be, it would be in this case, it would be AR dash license number 02, and then it would be 02's first, second, third, fourth certificate. Would that be workable in this new scenario?
Hey, Paul, this is Brad again.
Hey, Brad.
So your form would be, I mean, I would envision it like this. You tell me why this wouldn't work. So it would be like 19 AR-19-RDQ-001.
Uh-huh. Yeah, that's the way we're doing it. Except we don't have the AR there, so that inserting the state name in there is going to be no problem at all.
Right. So your alphanumeric would be RDQ-001.
Okay. So the numbers would not be. I mean, as long as the initials are there, then the numbers are going to be fine as far as the way we're doing it right now. Okay, great. All right, very good. Move along. Thank you.
This is Lisa from Georgia, and I have a question too. I'm wondering if we have some specific data that we find useful for our program, if there's flexibility that we could add that to the form, but not detract from the other key things you want on the form, but if there are things that Georgia specifically considers useful, we can keep using those.
So on that form at the bottom, it's in an Excel spreadsheet now, but at the bottom, it's row 28. We've left a place there that says here you could put any other information your state requires to be on the form.
Oh, great! I didn't see that before. Thank you.
And if you kind of try to print this out, you're going to see that there's a lot of space left. I mean, the form itself won't take up an entire 8 by 10, 8.5 by 11, so you have plenty of room to log county number or whatever it is you need to record.
Great. I don't have any.
Yeah, this looks good. I think this is good. A very good idea.
This is Robin. I was the one that had to go through all 20 forms to try to figure out some sort of standardized version we all could work with. And trying to do it from 20 of them is to get this, that drove me crazy.
And you did awesome, Robin. You did awesome.
Thank you, Robin.
You're welcome.
Okay, I'm going to move forward.
This is from Wisconsin. I'm sorry, I stepped away for a minute. I just wanted to ask a question. It seems like we're going to use this form for not only wild and wild simulated, but also for cultivated and wind-grown. Is that correct?
Oh, well,
Got both.
right, but Wisconsin is a different category because that's majority of what they do. So, Brad, did your working group talk about specifically cultivated ginseng, like as in Wisconsin? Or I know this really applies to states with a wild program that, by the way, may have a little bit of the other categories versus a state like Wisconsin that has the vast majority of cultivated root in the United States.
Right. And correct me if I'm wrong, but in Wisconsin, cultivated is under a different agency than wild. Is that right? Or am I dreaming that?
Nope, you're right. It's under Department of Agriculture.
Okay. So, it's been some time since we had all these discussions, and again, Robin can step in here. I thought we consulted with everybody, and I thought we had where this form would be okay for that, because it does have a cultivated box, contain, check one, can't be combined. So cultivated is in a box, wild's in a box, and that won't work, or that will work, or...
Well, I think now when I issue certificates to, this is Debbie, by the way, when I issue certificates to anybody that is going to move cultivated ginseng, it comes out of my database with the information, their certification number, their dealer or grower number pre-printed on it, and then sequential certificates, which then when APHIS does their inspection, they match those up. I don't know how I'm going to get this form into my database because probably different than you guys, I'm issuing hundreds and hundreds of these a year. So I need to keep it in a spot where I can, access my database.
Yes, I understand.
No. Should it be accepted from it then? Mm-hmm. It sounds like Wisconsin should be sort of exempted from this
as its own
requirement,
right?
Because they have a database that generates the permit.
Yeah.
And it's kind of different set of, and it seems like a robust database. Like it's got all the.
Yeah, I would advocate that Wisconsin cultivated. That Debbie, you continue to do with what you're doing, but Wisconsin wild and the other states endorsed having a standardized form.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Anyone else? Right now it's 3:15, and this call's supposed to end at 3:30. And we've got two more groups to move forward with in terms of outreach and law enforcement. One of the things that Rose and I had talked about is we thought that the regulatory working group would be a pretty robust conversation, and that we didn't know if we would get past that. And so Rose had kind of suggested that if we didn't get through the entire agenda, that we could kind of pick up maybe in September and move forward with that. So I'm going to suggest that we do that because I don't think that either of the two working groups probably have enough time to present their recommendations and then have an adequate discussion about it.
I have Brad has my hands up, but I don't know how to put my hand up on the computer. So just real quick, and it could be I'm all wet here, but I know that the enforcement group, I was looking through theirs, and it seems like it kind of mirrors Resolution 1, basically the recommendation. I don't know how long that would take them, but I'd throw it out to Ollis to say what he has to say about that. Maybe we could knock that out and come back to the O&E group.
Okay. How does Chris or Ron, do you feel that you can kind of go through things and have a discussion in 15 minutes on your recommendations?
I don't see why not. I mean, it's, Chris, unless you got something else in there, I think we put it in the regulatory.
Okay. Now, you don't have do you have a slideshow or PowerPoint?
We do not.
Okay. So if you can just go through your recommendations, that would be great.
All right. Do you want to do that, Chris, or do you want me to do it? Okay. I will jump on it. So much like the regulatory group, our recommendations are very similar. Hopefully. Yeah, okay. Anyways, besides everything else that has been going on in our meetings, there's also been another enforcement group. Pretty much every state is participating, and one of the topics has been ginseng. And that was one of our resolutions, so to speak, was increased dialogue, not only between the states and the Fish and Wildlife Service on cases of mutual interest and trying to share information on problem children, but also part of our resolution is increasing dialogue within the states. For many of you guys, the state enforcement entity is not the same as the state's regulatory entity or the folks that are doing all the paperwork. And it's imperative that those two groups are talking to each other and helping each other out and sharing information. We also, one of our resolutions, similar to the regulatory group, was the something formal from U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to the state ginseng management agencies and applicable NGOs to tighten up the accountability and integrity of the ginseng certification process. And primarily that is by instituting a digger permit and trying to clean that up. And again, we have lots of discussion on how that happens and how strong that needs to be. But I think that's the important part of bringing integrity to the system. And the only way to do that is either by having a permit or requiring, like they do in scrap, you know, the presentation of some form of state ID, something along that line to legitimize the process. And those were the two that I had. Chris, did you have anything that you wanted? We went back and forth a little bit the other day. Is there anything you wanted to add to that conversation?
Support the regulation, and then we have to work our way into enforcing the regulations. So I think our problem is, as a whole, is what this call per se, at least in my opinion, is that, you know, 50 CFR 2368 lays out exactly what the states have to do to be able to export ginseng, which is a very top-down approach. And we're trying to solve all of our problems on this call from the bottom up. You know, with each state having their own set of difficulties. I think Lisa was the one that brought it up maybe before, talking about in regards to the licensing and other requirements. If it was something that Fish and Wildlife Service directed the states to do, it would probably be an easier sell from an enforcement issue or from passing the laws anyway. Everybody hear me?
Yes.
I heard.
Okay. But standardizing the regs in regards to licensing and certifications is a big problem. Every state's uniquely different. And ginseng, of course, is traded across every state line from dealer to dealer. That's all I've got on that.
Okay, does anybody have any thoughts on that, on those recommendations?
This is Deb. Just a quick reminder to unmute yourself if you're wanting to speak.
Are we muted again? I don't know. Can you hear us?
Yeah, Elena, you're fine. It was just you asked a question and most people have muted themselves, and I just wanted to remind them that if they're answering your question, they would want to unmute themselves. I can hear you.
So do others have the resolutions in front of them? Do other people have those in front of them? Do they support them?
Yeah, do other people support these recommendations? Do you have the report in front of you where you can take?
Yeah, it's asking Fish and Wildlife to write a letter.
Right.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. Does anyone disagree with these?
It sounds like someone's on their computer, but their phone is, it's on hold. There we go. And Elena, just to be clear, were these in the set of documents that Rose emailed out yesterday? Is that the documents you're asking about?
The Law Enforcement Committee document, it's at the very end, it's the last page, it's called Next Steps. And there are two recommendations that I believe is what they were just discussed.
Okay.
This is Lisa from Georgia, and I have the document, and Georgia would support those next steps.
So I take it that there's not a lot of disagreement on these. So just to kind of reiterate, because we're getting down to the end, I apologize to the outreach group that we didn't get a chance to hear your recommendations, but we will have a follow-up call and try to kind of wrap up on that. But from just kind of to reiterate what we talked about, I think from the biology working group recommendations, I think that the group agreed that it was a way to move forward. They agreed in the concept to have a protocol and with the minimum level 1 requirements. For the regulatory working group recommendations, I think that for resolution 1, part of that is tabled for further discussion, and that what really was tabled on that is securing legislation, because that's a very difficult and complicated process for folks that needs a little bit more in-depth conversation. But I think that the group basically agreed that it's a good idea to move forward with somehow licensing the harvesters. And also we agreed, I think, that within this document, some of the language needs to be softened. For resolution 2, I think that there was agreement that we would move forward on this, that this was a good idea, again, possibly softening some of the language. For resolution 3, what we had talked about is that having this standardized form was a good idea, but Wisconsin would not be included in any form that was standardized because they already have a form that they work with, so they don't really need to change the way that they're doing things. And for the law enforcement regulations, that there was general agreement that that was a way to move forward. I think the next steps, you know, obviously we'll have another call for those issues that we weren't able to adequately address today. And I think also during that call, we can sit down and maybe work out some of the language that may, you know, beforehand, maybe work with, if you have some suggested changes to some of the language in any of this, to provide that to the working group chairs and co-chairs. And a lot of this, I think, you know, there's a lot of open-endedness at this point in terms of how to actually implement some of these things. But I think what was important in this call was basically to hear the report outs, to see what everybody had produced, and to share that, and just have kind of general agreement on the discussion. And this is where we need to move forward in the future, but maybe to hammer out and work out what the specifics are to get to that point. So if anybody, if I misrepresented that at all, please speak up, but that's your understanding of where we ended up here.
This is Brad Hadley again, Missouri. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So you said Wisconsin exempt from the form. Was that all of Wisconsin? I thought earlier it was Wisconsin cultivated. It makes no difference to me. I just wanted for clarification.
No, it'd just be cultivated, because they deal in such large quantities, and it's specific field-grown cultivated ginseng in Wisconsin. So I see them as, they have their own process.
Thank you.
Elena, this is Deb. If it may be helpful for you and Rose to sit down and email those out to the group, just to confirm that everyone is comfortable with those. It was, you know, I think on a webinar, sometimes it's hard to take in everything that you're recommending. I think it sounded about right, but it would give folks a chance to make sure that they're comfortable with everything if you were to jot those down and send them out over email.
Okay. It would also allow those that were in working groups that weren't able to participate today on the call.
So we can do that, Deb, no problem. And is there anything else before we end the call today?
I guess the only other thing, if anyone, I've been copied on those emails, or you can say in the group chat quickly, if anyone has any concerns with us posting this webinar so that it can be viewed by other folks in the working group, if they would like to, please let me know. If there are any concerns, we can always just email, I believe we could just email a link to this group and not have it posted. So just feel free. Yeah?
You want to post it on a public website as opposed to just sending people the link that only the people with the link could see it?
Yeah, I think those are our two options, because I can give it to our PR folks to post on the website, and we just want to know whether we want it, you know, public or not, I guess.
I think that from the beginning, it wasn't really a public forum, at least when we had that initial group, and
okay,
possibly these. So I don't know how other folks feel, but I think that probably not posting this in a general public forum would be the way to go.
Okay, then I'll work with folks to get it available to you and the folks in the working groups, and not beyond that. So excellent.
Yeah, I think that would be.
This is Lisa from Georgia. If I have time, can I make one comment?
Sure.
Thank you. I just wanted to say, although it seems like there's a lot of complexity and diversity among the states and what we can do, and not all of these steps are clear, having the discussion is very important. we learn across the board what are important priorities, and we see where we have agreement, and each state can then take that information, and where we can and where we have resources and the right knowledge, we can, work a little bit at a time on these issues. And we know that we are working on something that across the range of the ginseng, that these are important things universally, not just for our state. So even though the way forward across all the programs is hard, I think this is really valuable to help us make our priorities.
I think that's well stated.
Yeah.
And I think probably everyone would agree with that. It was well said. I wanted to thank everybody, and we'll probably have another call, probably sometime in September, but Rose will probably get that out to everyone. And I wanted to really thank everybody for all the work that they did on these reports and the presentations and the discussion that we had today. So I think that there was a lot of progress made, and I really thank everybody for their time.
Thank you, Pat.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a great day. Take care.
Law enforcement. The last two chats there just before they go away.
The last two. Where's the chats?
That's okay. That was down the side.
Oh.
I should be able to record the chats to document the chats if you guys need them.
Okay, yeah, that would be great. Because a lot of the stuff came out in the chats, especially some specific language.
Sounds good. I'll send that to you guys.
Okay, thank you, Deb.
All right, you guys take care.
Thanks for all your work.
Thanks, Deb.
Yep.